Hi everyone, Jay here from Jade Productions, back with another video. As you can tell by the title, today we are breaking down a Seraphon list. Just taking a look at one. This is a list, so first off, that put together. This is a list that I intend to kind of build and take based on what I've already got in my Seraphon, and it was designed with the intent to be a little more on the competitive side, but not on the super competitive side, more to be using what I've got to be the best of what you can do, and kind of lean into what I think the strengths are of the new Seraphon book quite a lot. So, beginning off with this new list that we've put together, the first thing to note is that we have gone with the Coalesced Thunder Lizard Allegiance. So, this is important for our list for two things. First off, Coalesced is simply, in my opinion, just the better one. It's more straightforward. You're gonna get more benefit from immediately from its bonuses. The Starborn, they're not so great, I don't think. I would always rather get the extra attack, even though the jaw attacks aren't great on some of the basic stuff. They are fantastic on anything else that has them that isn't the base guys. And you know what? I'm not going to argue with free attacks. Attacks is where it's at, and we got plenty of ways of getting bonuses to that. Unfortunately, the Coalesced, what we're here for is not the additional jaw attacks, but the -1 to damage, and the Thunder Lizard giving us the additional 2 wounds to all of our monsters, and allowing us to take Stegodons as battle line. This is one of our most important things. Now, we'll get to the importance of the Stegodon as battle line in a moment. But being Coalesced Thunder Lizard, we're going for the more immediate, durable, straightforward army that can take a bit more of a pounding compared to the Starborn in exchange for sacrificing summoning and a little bit of mobility, because we kind of have all the mobility we need already built within the list. It's just that the summoning we don't particularly need, and we don't need any teleportation, because as you'll see in a moment, well, as you can see on screen, the list is filled with things that move very, very fast. Now, this list could benefit from being Starborn. I'll put that right out there. You could rejig it a little bit and have it more focused on the summoning side. It's very similar to what a lot of people tell me they run Starborn with. However, I firmly am in the Coalesced camp as the better Allegiance ability, just in general, because of the -1 damage and because Thunder Lizard. Now, Thunder Lizard is the king solely because the Stegodons are present there as battle line, and that's what we want. And it enhances our monsters, and the monsters are A, one of the big selling points of our army, B, they're the stars of our army. They just don't perform as well as they should, and Thunder Lizard helps rectify that a little bit, being Coalesced Thunder Lizard. So, first things first, in our leaders, we have an Engine of the Gods. Now, the Engine of the Gods, we've given the Fusel of Conflagration, the mandatory relic that we have to give. It's not a particularly bad relic. It lets us pick a target and spit out mortal wounds. A decent amount of mortal wounds as well. It's a short range. It's not one use either, so we can continuously use it to try and shoot mortal wounds. We make the Engine of the Gods a mortal wound battery. However, what the purpose of the Engine of the Gods here in this list is to switch between mobile mortal wounds artillery battery, as well as being a Stegodon in general, which is already going to benefit immensely. It's going to go up an additional 2 wounds to 12 wounds. It's going to get an extra bite attack, so it's going to be we're going to have -1 damage to it, so it's going to be a beefy, chunky boy. And the idea of the Engine of the Gods in this list is not so much to actually do the ability where it shoots mortal wounds, but to actually get the ability where it heals, and use it essentially as a mobile healing platform for the rest of our Stegodons that we're going to be including in this list. And yeah. Now, of course, we have a Slan with starting spell is Stellar Tempest. Typically, I prefer to bring Croak, but any Slan will do. All Slans are mandatory. The Slan here with Stellar Tempest, Slans have the ability to change out their spells at the beginning of every hero phase, so we're going to be able to do great things. Most of the time, we'll be starting in the star thing. the what's it called? The thing that gives us +1, the Astralis. No, not the Astralis. The stellar formations, essentially. They've renamed them a few times. Essentially, we're going with the Wand one, which is going to give us +1 casting to all of our heroes. And we're going to use that probably most of the time in this game. Probably switching to the Swift Hunters stellar formation when we need to move up a bit more. Particularly with our slower ground units. It's going to give us a little bit extra run and charge in what it does, but most of the time we're going to be in that. And our Slan Star Master, he's here to cast Stellar Tempest and Comet's Call, and his whole goal is to bombard and get us command points. Now, his exact command ability is not the most fantastic thing, but it does have some uses in this list to help protect us from opponents shooting. The fly is not a huge thing that we need to, it's not a huge part of why we're bringing him, the fact that he grants fly. It's more the additional protection from shooting attacks, which is a-okay. That's kind of what we want, and he'll be rolling and getting us some command points, hopefully, and he'll be serving as that command battery. Spells, command points, that's it. Stellar Tempest is the good one to start off with. It's got a decent range. You could change up this list slightly and take out this a few things. With the Engine of the Gods, you could actually get a few different characters in there. You could probably put in an Astrolith Bearer. But the Astrolith Bearer, in my opinion, pairs better with Croak, since the Astrolith Bearer can increase the range of Croak's Deliverance spell, which he can cast multiple times. So at that point, you can have, like, anything gets within a bubble of Croak, you can just nuke it with Mortal Wounds. But that said, we're not running with that. The Slan Star Master benefits less, but he still benefits from a tasty... Everything still benefits from the Astrolith Bearer's tasty 6-up to ignore damage, and the +1 to cast, which is always fantastic. We can achieve some great casting. With this sort of setup, we're looking at a +2 to cast on our Slan Star Master, which is pretty good. 1 built in, 1 from the Stellar Formation. Then, mostly we're aiming for Comet's Call to basically do that artillery. We can switch out if we need be based on the situation. That's the advantage of Slan. The Slan lore of spells they range from okay to really mediocre, but they all have a utility-based use, which is why it's useful that the Slan can swap out before it. What you choose to start the Slan with for its starting spell actually doesn't matter. Again, because you can change them out, I typically start with Stellar Tempest simply because it's the longest range spell that allows it to act as artillery straight away, and I can go, yep, I'm going to bombard that thing at this range if they've moved forward and gotten the first turn, or I can bank it. Either way, I'm not going to really miss any of the other spells, really. Now, and it's important to note that the Slan is not our general in this list. Our general in this list is actually the Pterodon Chief. So the Skink Chief on Pterodon is essentially the key to our list, actually. So, as the key to our list, he is the general, and we are taking for him not the Thunder Lizard command trait, because while the Thunder Lizard general has to take the Thunder Lizard command trait if they have the amount, the funny thing is, looking at the keywords and confirming this, the Pterodon Chief does not actually have the mount keyword. Sorry, quick correction. It designates that a Thunder Lizard general with a monster mount must have this command trait instead of the one listed on page instead of one of the ones listed on page 57, and that adds 1 to the attacks. Now, the reason we're doing it and putting it on this guy is because he is a mount, but he doesn't count as a monster. The Pterodon is not a monster, so we are free to put any of the command traits we want on him, and in this particular case, the general Skink command traits are actually, each one is very, very good. So here's what we're doing, essentially, is we are taking... Yeah, he doesn't have the monster keyword. So what we're doing is we are putting on him, as part of it, the Master of Star Rituals, and it's very important that we put this on a Pterodon Chief or something that's not a wizard. Again, we could make this the Engine of the Gods. However, that if we do it with the Engine of the Gods, there's some cost benefit there. For example, the reason we've chosen the Pterodon Chief is because we can stack the minuses on it by giving it its relic, the Cloak of Feathers. Now, we've got 2 relics here because if you're looking at the list on screen, we do have a War Scroll Battalion giving us that extra relic. So there is that. So it's very important to have the Cloak of Feathers on this guy. Now, the Cloak of Feathers is a fantastic relic. As far as the relics go, the second best one after it is the Sacred Stegodon Helm. So both of those are fantastic. The Sacred Stegodon Helm, probably better off on a Skink Chief on Stegodon, but the Cloak of Feathers is fantastic anyway. Also, the Sacred Stegodon Helm would work well on a Ripidactyl if you're intending to send them into combat, since it'll increase the Ripidactyl's save to a decent 4-up. But I still would not recommend it on anything that isn't like the Engine of the Gods or a Skink Chief on Stegodon. The Cloak of Feathers, the -1, is very nice. And comparing and pairing that with the Pterodon Chief, the Pterodon Chief already has -1 for melee weapons that target it. So, in combat, you can essentially get this thing. If he gets tied up in combat, he's going to be -2 to hit. It's going to be very useful since he's only got 5 wounds with a 6+ save. Fortunately, and one of the reasons we've chosen the Pterodon Chief here is we don't want him to actually be in combat with that 16-inch move. We want it to be very rare that he is. His move is, the Pterodon Chief is really cheap and has a super high movement, which is good for us because it lets us get him where we need to ensure that he's exactly where we need him in the following turn every time to give the buff that we want. And that buff comes from, as we circle back around in this lovely little circle, back to his command trait and why we've made him the general. And that is Master of Star Rituals. Now, this command trait has one of 2 effects. It has one effect if they're a Skink Wizard, which, as tempting and as good as a Skink Star Priest is, or the Skink Oracles, we never want to make them have this, because all they get from it is they add 1 to the casting rolls for the general if they are a wizard. If they are not a wizard, however, then once per battle round you can use the Herald of the Old One's command ability from the Skink Priest War Scroll without a command point being spent. Now, this is very important because that is a powerful ability which, in summary, allows us to, if we go to the Skink Priest, essentially turning them into a Skink Priest, which is an essential thing. You could do a lot of things here. You could take out a few things and get more Skink Priests, but this lets us be more efficient simply by turning in a already super fast unit that's a little better than the standard Skink Priest, and just giving it the ability, and now we don't have to spend any command points on the ability. However, the more of this we have, that's pretty good. So, the Herald of the Old One's command ability, for reference, for those of you listening to the list, you can use the command ability in your hero phase. If you do so, you pick 1 Skink unit wholly within 18 inches of a friendly model with this command ability. Until your next hero phase, you can add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks made by a unit. A unit cannot benefit from this ability more than once per command phase. Now, we get a free 1 of those, and that is essential. Why is it essential? Because everything in this list is going to benefit from that. And I'll put it this way. Our Skinks are going to be able to shoot things much more accurately, but we don't want to really put this on our Skinks with bolt spitters. No. The main targets for this are the Bastiladon in our list, which has the Skink keyword, the Stegodons with Starstreak bows, which have the Skink keywords, the Pterodon riders with Sunleash bowlers, which have the Skink keyword, increasing their accuracy and allowing them to not only melee things a lot better when they have to, particularly it's going to be a huge benefit of the Stegodons in melee, but when it comes to the things like the Bastiladon, the Stegodons, and the Pterodon riders, no matter which one you put it on, you're going to be able to increase the ranged efficiency a lot. The best target for this is the Bastiladon and the Pterodon riders. The Starstreak bow is already fairly accurate, So unless you desperately want to hit it on 2s and you want to get that extra firepower, there is that. And the 16-inch movement on our Pterodon Chief will allow us to move him around to benefit the units that we need benefited when we need benefited. So, there is that. We've essentially made a hard-to-hit, more defensive, super fast-moving, light cavalry general who's handing out +1 to hit for free without spending a command point. At the same time, we have a Skink Star Priest as well. He is part of our Shadow Strike Temple Host. Now, the Shadow Strike Temple Host, just to clarify, what that ability does for the Shadow Strike Temple Host is, if in your hero phase, pick one enemy unit that is visible to the Star Priest or Priest from this battalion. Until your next hero phase, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by units from this battalion that target that unit. So here you can see we're building up that synergies of +1 for our Skinks. Now, the things within our Temple Host, as you'll see, are the Pterodon Riders and the Skinks with Bolt Splitters in this particular case. So, in this case, our Pterodon Chief only needs to be giving his +1 to the to the Bastillodon, or to the Stegodons, or to the Ripidactyls. And he'll be able to move up and move with them really, really fast. Whereas the Skink Priest can designate a target, and you'll be able to lay into it with the Skinks with Bolt Splitters and the Pterodon Riders with Sunleash Bowlers. Very nice indeed. On top of that, the Skink Priest is going to benefit us further by, Star Priest, sorry, because it has the ability to pick a friendly Seraphon unit wholly within 12 inches in its hero phase. Unmodified wound rolls for an attack made by that unit is 6. The attack inflicts 1 mortal wound. Very nice. We can put that on just about anything and get a good benefit out of it. It doesn't specify that it has to be a melee attack, so feel free to put that on the Skinks. Or, if you really, really want, to put it on the Stegodons. Everything here has the Seraphon keyword, so don't be afraid of that. He has the potential to get us an extra command point. He has a very nice spell with Blazing Starlight, which lets us pick an enemy unit until within 18 inches, until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that unit. So you can really do some nice debuffs with that, which is nice and useful. He's also given, we've chosen to give him in this list the Hand of Glory spell. Now, the Hand of Glory spell is just a universally nice spell to start him off with. It's just a nice utility spell in terms of that, because the spell, if I'm recalling correct, it gives a... the Hand of Glory is a pretty easy to cast value of 6. You pick a friendly unit wholly within 18 inches of the caster, and they get to re-roll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by that unit. So you can get +1s, re-rolling 1s. That's a good thing to stick on the Bastillodon to make it even more accurate. The Stegodons benefit. Again, there's nothing in this list that doesn't benefit from it. So you can see that we're building up a lot of synergies that no matter what we're applying our buffs to, we're going to be increasing the effectiveness to a point where we're actually going to be able to deal damage and be effective. And all at the low cost of not having any Saurus whatsoever in this entire list. Now, poor Saurus. Still salty about that. Anyway, so there is that. Now, just a real quick moment in terms of going back to the Slain Starmaster. We talked about Stellar Tempest being an excellent spell to start it off with. The one I would recommend swapping to later when you need to is the Celestial Apotheosis to try and keep your Stegodons and Bastillodons alive. Because that will allow you to heal stuff and subtract Bravery. But you don't really care about the Bravery, you mostly care about the healing 1 to D3 wounds depending on your casting roll. And with Seraphon and the Slan in the right configuration, you should be able to get the 10 plus to heal D3 some of the time. Now, let's move on. We have in our Behemoth slot our Bastillodon with the Solar Engine. Now, this is one of those things. Now, the Bastillodon with Solar Engine is the obvious choice 9 out of 10 times. However, there is argument if you wanted to change it up for the Ark of Sotek. Now, the Bastiladon with the solar engine gives us a lovely 9 attacks at its base profile, hitting on 4s, winning on 3s, -1, 2 damage. We can increase that to potentially 2+ to hit, 3+ with our Oracle, 2+ with our jeez, I'd just forgotten it. Yeah, +1 from our Herald of the Old Ones, and we can give it 6 ups to wound. Sorry. Yes, so we're just giving it the it's not part of our battalion, that's what I was thinking. It's not part of the battalion, so we can get it to hit on 3 ups, re-rolling 1s, wounding on 3s, -1, 2 damage, with 9 attacks. Pretty nice. We could even give it mortal wounds if we wanted. Bit of a waste though. So that's nice, and it's got a 24-inch range, which is a lovely range in Age of Sigmar. It's a pretty long range in terms of everything else. It has its meteoric javelins. We don't care about them. They're a emergency defense sort of thing. Its melee attack, 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1 D3, is not the most damaging thing, but it is reliable and nice. Now, this thing, as everyone knows about Seraphon, is pretty tasty in terms of durability. It starts up with it has a degrading save, which starts at a 1+, which essentially means you ignore Rend for a little while until you suffer enough wounds, which means the best way to carve through this chonky boy is to throw mortal wounds at him. At the same time, we have 10 wounds, which is going to go up to 12 wounds from being in coalesced with Thunder Lizard. Now, the argument for the Ark of Sotek, if you wanted to change it up, I still recommend, particularly for this list, the Solar Engine. The Solar Engine is just a very good option with the synergies that we're trying to build. But the thing about the Ark of Sotek is it's a 3-inch range melee weapon, and you're throwing essentially a battering ram that is the Bastiladon into an enemy unit. And sure, you're not probably going to do a lot of damage, but you are probably going to tie them up depending on what they are, which makes it an excellent blocking unit. An excellent blocking unit, and that is where the argument for the Ark of Sotek comes in. If you want to use it not as an artillery battery, but as the undying tank battering ram that it sometimes can be, you give it the Ark of Sotek, which gives it 18 attacks, which hit on 4s, which you can make hit on 3s, rerolling 1s if you want, and wounding on 6s, 1 damage piece, no rend, and an unmodified hit roll for a 6 inflicts 1 mortal wound, and the attack sequence ends. So there is that. Now, you can use it to pile on lots of low-grader things, but don't expect a lot of wounds. The Ark of Sotek is only really best if you can get bonuses to wound, which is not something that's very common in this book. In fact, I can't think of a single thing that does it other than one of the Saurus leaders. So, there's an argument for the Ark of Sotek, and it depends on how you want to tactically use it, but the Bastiladon with the solar engine is the better choice for the synergies and buffs that we're building within this list. Now, next up, we have our battle line. We have 4 battle line units. We have 2 10-man units of Skinks with bolt spitters, which are part of our Shadowstrike Temple host. These things are here to screen and capture objectives, and provide some 16-inch range, 5s and 5s, -1. We don't particularly care. We're not getting anything for the bonus attacks for weapons, so we're only 1 attack. And that's really it. They are fast, though. And the idea of this list is to take objectives, play the game, use the blocking, skirmish things down. Leave the heavy hitting to the other battle line that we have, our Stegodon with Star Streak bows. Now, the Stegodons are a lovely different story, being here with the Coalesced. When it comes to Stegodons, we have 10 wounds going up to 12, we have a 4-up save, Depending on the enemies we're fighting, we can make those 3-up saves with our Armored Crest. Now, if you wanted, you could give them the Sunfire Throwers. However, the Sunfire Throwers are definitely limited in range, and they're just not as fantastic as they could be. Now, they are mortal wound spitters, and they will devastate a horde if you throw them into it. So there is that case, and it's one of those things of you'll have to weigh up whether or not you want to throw these things directly into combat or not. And it's one of those things of, I have to say, don't do it. Against hordes, you will undoubtedly almost always lose. Monsters, 9 out of 10 times, will die very quickly to a horde of anything, particularly once they get buffed up. We have Steadfast Majesty on the Stegodons, which everything in our army is Skink, so everything's going to get to reroll Battle Shock. They deal mortal wounds, but the reason we opt for the Sky Streak bow is very simply, it's 24 inches, so we can sit back on objectives and shoot. Same with the Solar Engine Bastiladon. We hit on 3s, we wound on 3s. We can make that hit on 2s. Very reliable right there. -1 rend. Fantastic, any rend is good rend. 3 damage apiece. That is tasty, and that will chip apart enemy monsters, characters, you name it. So, the reason for the Sky Streak bow is that we can get 6 attacks with 3s and 3s, -1, 3 damage, to tear down large, high threat, high wound targets that we need to get gone ASAP before they reach our lines, and we have that 24-inch range to do it. After we basically skirmish down the most immediate threats, then we can put our Stegodons into combat, where they have a large amount of attacks, most of which is 3s and 3s, -1 across the board. We get our Meteoric War Spear, which is actually only for the Stegodon Chief, so ignore that one. You get the Massive Horns with 2 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1, 4 damage at its top bracket, going down to 3s and then 2s, and then 1s. You have your Grinding Jaws, which in Coalesced is going up to 3 attacks instead of 2, 3s and 3s, -1, 2 damage. And your Crushing Stomps, which start at 5 attacks and work their way down at 3s and 3s, -1, 2 damage. So, as battle line, they are pretty fantastic. 12 wounds. For their points cost, they're not the most efficient things, but the way in which they're able to execute things and tear down opponents, get the extra armor, buff well with our synergies here, because remember, all the synergies that we've discussed so far aren't restricted to shooting or melee, they just affect flat-out hit rolls, and so we can do that as well. We can buff them up when we can heal them with our Engine of the Gods and with our Slan to ensure they stay in there. And of course, we do have the Engine of Gods, which goes from 12 wounds to 14 wounds in this list, and has all the same abilities and same sort of attacks, same damage profile, but at the same time also gives a lovely random dice chart, which can be fun, where we're mostly aiming for either the healing, the 4 to 8 bracket or the 9 to 12 bracket. So there is that. And then we have our other units, our Pterodon Riders with Sunleashed Bowlers, and we have 6 of them. Now, we have 6 of them, and they pair well with our Pterodon Chief, obviously. So, with 6 of them, they have 3 wounds apiece, they have a 6-up save, they have a 16-inch movement. And these guys are yet another form in which we can skirmish and wear down opponents. Hopefully they never catch them, but they likely will, given the Sunleashed Bowlers are 6-inch range, D6 attacks, 4-up, 3-ups. Now, 6d6 attacks with 4-up, 3-ups is going to put a dent in anything, hopefully, unless it's an Elf Lumineth unit or an Ossiarch Bone Reaper unit. In that case, you might as well just be spraying them with a water gun. Suffice to say, though, against most hordes, this will absolutely deal damage, and at the same time, they have their razor-sharp jaws. If they get caught in combat, where they have 4 attacks each, 4s and 4s, -1, we have ways to buff them. They are part of the the Shadow Strike Temple Host, so they get +1 to hit on things that are designated by the Skink Priest. We get quite a lot of shooting attacks with this at the 6-inch range. We have to be danger close, but again, we have that 16-inch movement where we can move close and we can pick and choose our engagements. And they're also great for capping objectives. Again, that 16-inch movement. Movement is key in this game, and the fact that you're going to be able to skirt around just about anywhere is fantastic. They have their ability to drop bombs, which is very nice. For each, you can only do it once per battle. After you finish a move, pick an enemy unit and roll 1 dice for each model in this unit that you passed across any models from an enemy unit. Sorry. For each model in this unit that passed across any models from an enemy unit. So you use that nice 16-inch movement. You can even run if you want to get a 16 plus 1 movement at the least. So at least a 17-inch movement to fly over an enemy unit. That is really going to cause you trouble. And then on 4-up, for each 4-up that you roll on your 6 dice, assuming that the squad is still intact, you're going to deal D3 mortal wounds. The Pterodon Chief can help that out a bit if you can get him into position to do so without risking the Pterodon Chief as your general, because again, he's really important to this list and making it function well over the long term. He lets that go up on a 2+, but it has to be done. He has to use that command ability when you're dropping the bombs, so keep that in mind. Our Ripidactyl Riders, now we could adjust this list because they're relatively same, they are almost same points cost. We could shift away from 6 Pterodon Riders and go for 6 Ripidactyl Riders. Ripidactyls are basically, they're the same stat, but they're flying shock cavalry instead. So whereas the Pterodons want to skirmish foes and drown them in attacks, what the Ripidactyls want to do is they want to pick a target, charge into it, eviscerate it, hopefully in a single strike, and then move into something else before they die. Now, they can also be part of the Shadow Strike Temple Host if we want. Unfortunately, so we can adjust that to make this list even more efficient. And they're similar stat-wise. The difference between the Pterodon Riders and the Ripidactyl Riders is 12-inch movement and a 5-up save on the Ripidactyls. But the Ripidactyls are far better in melee, despite not appearing as such in the first place. A small unit of 3, in this case, we're using them mostly as blockers, and they can still unleash a whole load of attacks to tear into something. But we're mostly using them as a delaying unit in this particular case, and as an objective capper and objective taker. We can reverse this, as I said, and put more emphasis on the Ripidactyls, supported by the Pterodons if we want, which nets us a nice value, because 6 of them throws out a lot of attacks, because they're 3 attacks, 4s and 3s with their tearing jaws, and 1 attack, 4s and 4s with the Rider's spears. Now, on top of that, Ripidactyl Alpha gives them an extra attack with the leader. The Bloat Toad, you receive 1 Bloat Toad marker for each Ripidactyl Rider unit in your army. And at the start of your combat phase, you can set up 1 Bloat Toad next to 1 enemy unit. If you do, you can re-roll hit rolls for attacks made by the Tearing Jaws for friendly Ripidactyl units wholly within 6 inches of that enemy unit. At the end of the combat phase, remove the Bloat Toad marker. It cannot be used again in the battle. So it's a one-use re-roll against a single target, essentially, in most cases. Now, that's pretty cool, especially with the sheer number of attacks we can do. One of the things about this unit is if you're fielding 6 of them, you really have to maximize your charge, and you're going to have a nice frontage for a counterattack. So expect that as well. So you really got to pick your targets for Ripidactyls. The 3-man unit, they can charge in and hit the flanks of a unit and have less frontage, so they take less attacks back overall. But at the same time, it's far less wounds. So you have to weigh that up. And Voracious Appetite. If an unmodified hit roll for an attack made with Tearing Jaws is a 6, the attack scores 2 hits instead of 1. So there is that. They have a potential for a lot of cascading stuff. They are eligible to benefit from, again, the +1 and... so we can get them actually hitting on 2s, re-rolling everything. We can have our Pterodon Chief use his Oracle ability, and we can, if we put them in the Shadow Strike Temple Host instead of the Pterodons in this list, we can have them get the bonus if they're hitting the designated target. That is the list. Now, the idea of this list is, as you can see, it's not perfect. It has a lot of room to wiggle around and adjust it as you need. But the idea is to tear the foe down from a range and use superior movement of some of our faster units, such as Skinks and Pterodon Riders, to delay foes, block foes, take objectives relatively quickly, play the objective game, and leave the core of our army, the Bastilaton, our 3 Stegodons, and our Slan, as sort of a central group, as forgive the old 40k, actually no, I believe the term in 40k is a parking lot, and have these guys sit there, deal their damage at range with nice buffs, just hammering into opponents, tearing down targets at long range with mortal wounds and high damage ranged attacks before charging them in or getting charged when you need to ensure that you hold those objectives, or the enemy finally reaches you and tries to kill you. You're going to be working with a low model count, so you really need to pay attention to your movement and positioning in order to make the most out of this army. In overall competitiveness, I would say this army is probably a solid 6 or 7. It will either work wonderfully or it will fall over and collapse in an eyesore depending on the list that you're facing, simply as a matter of scenario, and certain things just hard counter it. And that's the way it goes when you have some of these very niche units in it. However, I think this is one of the more powerful Seraphon lists that you can build without leaning heavily into Croak and endless spells. Okay, so that's it from me. Thank you all for watching. If you have any thoughts, you've got your own Seraphon list that you like to listen to, you want ideas for other Seraphon lists based on certain themes or ideas or tactics, leave in the comments below. Join the Discord that we have. You can find that links in the description. Come chat us in there if you have any questions about Seraphon in general, and let us know what you think, any thoughts or anything else, and good luck, and I will see you next time. Happy wargaming, everyone. Stay cool, stay safe. I've been Jay from Jade Productions.